I'm genuinely sorry about that thumbnail. I put way too much time into this video to not get any views.
Now close your eyes. This is a flashback. The year is 2020, but like before all the 2020 stuff happened. You're a high school sophomore vibing with the family on a school night, looking for a new show to watch because you're bored. With no other context than it being a superhero show and that you've heard some nice things about it, you decide to give The Boys series on Amazon Prime Video a shot. You put on the first episode and it is very, very good. Almost 16-year-old you had just been fiending for some quality content, and this unhinged, gross, and frighteningly real depiction of superheroes was just perfect for the edgelord that was you back in those days. It was so good, in fact, that you immediately watched the whole season without your family. You are a bad boy, and The Boys is now one of, if not your absolute favorite show of all time. Things are feeling good, and with the knowledge that season 2 comes out later this very year, it feels like things are finally looking up for you. That was 5 years ago. You're in your early 20s now, you have an associate's degree, you never got COVID, flex. You drove a pickup truck for 4 of those years, but never actually did truck things with it. You have a girlfriend who tells you should write fan fiction, and on top of all of that, you don't really like The Boys anymore. What happened?
See, people love that cozy feeling that Soup's given. Some golden cunt swoop out the sky, save the day, so you don't gotta do it yourself.
Season 1 of The Boys was an entirely new experience for me. By the way, everything I say in this video is just my opinion. If at any point I say something you disagree with, just pretend that you don't. There was this deeply uncomfortable yet transfixing feeling invoked in just about every scene in Season 1. The sense of danger presented by nearly every Soup, and the willingness to show exactly how dangerous their powers had the potential to be. The soberingly real horror of being disillusioned with those feelings of childlike optimism and faith in the entities that promise to keep your best interests at heart. The feeling of abject terror every time Homelander was on screen. The uncertainty of if our morally questionable but still relatively good guys would come out onto the other side. And the tension that arose from watching them uncover the conspiracy of how Vought truly stays in control of everything. There was a personality to The Boys' first outing. It was weird, it was gross, it was weirdly, grossly funny at times. All of that while having something to say, a genuinely interesting story, and a sizable cast of distinct, compelling personalities all bouncing off of each other.
Oi Hughie, Homelander done fucked me wife, and he put spoilers in this very video.
What?
Spoilers, Hughie, for the series The Boys on Amazon Prime Video, as well as... Can you believe it, Hughie? Fucking diabolical, that's what it is.
Season 1 is so good that it's almost beyond my ability to describe, but you've probably heard all about it at this point. It's been almost 6 years. There's a reason that so many people were so invested in The Boys after the sleeper hit that was this season. It's far and away the best season of not only The Boys, but arguably some of the best content to come out of any modern superhero adjacent series. But not entirely, though. There was one part of Season 1 that all this time later still kind of rubs me the wrong way, and in hindsight honestly does a lot more than it did back when I first watched it, and that's the ending. Let me explain. In the final arc of Season 1, Vought becomes aware of The Boys' shenaniganery. Homelander is now aware of The Boys. This is pretty big. It took a whole episode to figure out how to handle Translucent. Kimiko, who's super strong in her own right, gets absolutely washed in a fight with Black Noir. Even minor Soups like Popclaw and Ezekiel are treated as legitimate threats. The only way they can be handled is through blackmail and trolling. In Season 1, The Boys are afraid of the Soups, and all of the Soups are afraid of Homelander. Homelander is the ultimate final threat whose shadow looms over every scene. Tension rises throughout the entire season. Parallel to The Boys' every little victory or gleaning of new information, we're shown more and more as to why drawing Homelander's ire is the absolute last thing anyone wants. The mere mention of his name shifts the power dynamic of Translucent's imprisonment as he scans the city at supersonic speed, even confronting Frenchie head to head. One wrong move, that's tension. Homelander finds Translucent's remains and is directly called out by Butcher, deciding to lock in on finding out whoever did this, building more tension. The plane scene shows exactly how dangerous Homelander is, even when he isn't actively trying to be, and then he gets away with it in the end. That's more tension. Hughie goes to Bible camp and has to stand face to face with Homelander, who manages to make even a baptism scary. That's more tension, baby. They even managed to make us scared for fucking Kevin, the chronic abuser of his perceived power over others. Of course, we didn't know at this time that nobody harms the Peak and gets away with it, but that's still such an obscene amount of tension to have so early on. Tension comes to a head in the season finale. The boys have been captured. They get out, of course, but that's still a whole thing. Meanwhile, Butcher is holding Madeline Stillwell hostage so as to, against any sort of self-preservation or common sense, honestly, draw Homelander directly to him. He shows up and realizes that Butcher plans to hurt him, not in the physical sense because that's impossible, but rather by killing Stillwell, with whom he had... I don't need or want to describe the Madeline Landership. You've seen the series, you know. Tension reaches its absolute peak, never coming close to this again in my opinion, but we'll get to that later, when Homelander turns his attention from Butcher to Madeline, getting her to admit finally that
I'm scared of you.
And that's the closure that he needs. We get a GG well played from Butcher as he opts to self-immolate, but that's not the end of his story. In an epilogue, we find out that Butcher's wife Becca, whose presumed death had been his entire motivation for leading his crusade against Vought and Homelander, had not only actually been alive this whole time, but was raising Ryan, her and Homelander's son. End credits. That's the season. Cliffhanger alert! Now, I don't dislike the cliffhanger per se. It just feels a bit strange to, after such a tightly written and focused 8 episodes, conclude not on an actual conclusion, but rather a promise of more to come in future seasons. The Becca-Ryan reveal was an absolute game changer, and I'm just not a huge fan of how it's all dropped on the viewer in the final 2 minutes, rather than being properly built up to throughout the season. Again, not at all a terrible ending, but aside from the whoa factor of it, it kind of just feels like a bit of a cop-out after everything that had been built up so masterfully. I know I didn't really go into that much depth on the good of season 1. That's largely because this video is kind of made under the assumption you've already seen the show, and maybe have had a somewhat similar experience to me in regards to how you feel toward it. Hey, Editing Jack here. I feel like I could have elaborated a little bit better on that last point, so I'm here.
So my mic just broke. That's awesome. What I'm trying to say is that season 1 is so universally acclaimed that there's hardly anything that I have that I can meaningfully add to the conversation that hasn't been done to death already, save a little bit of criticism toward the ending. Season 1 is so well put together and well organized and well executed. I'm not here to repeat everything that the internet has been saying for the past 6 years. I'm here to talk about my own experience with the show. I wanted to lay down the groundwork of what made the show work in the first place. From there, well, that's what the rest of the video is for. Alright, that's it. Transition to season 2.
Ashley. What made you think I would ever allow a cripple into the 7? For fuck's sakes, Ashley, don't look at him, look at me! Ashley! Look at...
The standard set by season 1 was extremely high, and the seeds for season 2, while not planted in the most eloquent fashion, did paint a pretty good picture of the direction the series plot would be heading going forward. I don't have that much to say about season 2. It was pretty good, don't get me wrong, but a lot of it felt slower and less urgent than season 1, which isn't necessarily a bad thing by any means. It's just that for a season where the boys are allegedly on the run from Vought and the 7, there isn't as great a sense of tension or stakes as there was in season 1. After episode 3, everything slows down. The gang is even fairly comfortable going on side quests and splitting up and looking for clues. The threat of Homelander and co, while still there, for some reason just doesn't feel as omnipresent as it did before they know who the boys were. That's kind of my biggest issue with season 2. There isn't that much momentum keeping the plot going forward. In season 1, almost every episode ended on some kind of strong hook. Oh snap, is Translucent dead? How do they get out of this situation? Oh snap, Translucent is dead. How do they get out of this situation? Oh snap, what's Compound V? Oh snap, what's her deal? Oh snap, oh snap, oh snap. In this season, aside from oh snap, Butcher is back and the whale scene, there isn't that much of a draw to come back into the next episode, at least up until oh snap, the head just exploded. I'm not the type to conflate slow pacing with bad pacing. Better Call Saul is my favorite thing, but that show made it clear from the get-go that it was building towards something great. The Boys season 2, aside from the question of where everyone will be be by the finale, the season's endgame is pretty unclear until we reach the penultimate episode. That being said, there is still a lot to appreciate about Season 2. For one, the fight scenes have gone up significantly in quality. Back in Season 1, they'd either have to be in complete darkness or look like this, so pretty much anything is an improvement, and by golly have they improved. Maeve is generally pretty underutilized as a character, but I really liked her subplot this season. Lamplighter was pretty fun. Even though Giancarlo Esposito is pretty much exclusively typecasted as this kind of character, he brings this level of sass and genuine hard-edged coldness to Stan Edgar that sets him apart from his other roles under the curse of Gustavo. My head exploded with the reveal that the seemingly inconsequential character Victoria Newman was actually the head exploder who exploded heads by using the power to explode heads, which causes heads to explode by using the... Ryan and Becca's relationships with Butcher and Homelander are probably some of the best character dynamics in the whole series, at least certainly in this season. And while the reveal of newcomer to the series Stormfront being a felt a teensy-weensy bit like a cheap way to hammer home to the audience that she's evil, her speech that came with that reveal is honestly one of my favorite scenes in the show.
We are in a war for the culture. The other races are grinding us down and taking what is rightfully ours, but we can fight back.
I love Homelander's reaction here. At first, he doesn't really jive with the revelation. I don't think he truly cares about her whole racial purity, supremacy ideals. Homelander is only really on board with Stormfront's dream once she appeals to his ego.
And you will be the man who will lead us.
In his mind, he's always been greater than and above everyone around him, and for someone to finally tell him that he's not only the most specialist boy in the whole wide world, that he's a literal god among gods, but to also hear that it is his divinely ordained birthright to lead an army of said gods, it beautifully plants the seeds for the ultimate endgame of the series. What the season also does better than all the others is properly conclude its story. Seasons 1 and 4 don't really end with proper, well, endings, but rather a major status quo shift to promise more spine-tingling misadventures coming soon to a movie tavern near you. And then Season 3... You can see the chapters of this video. Season 2 is the only season to end with what I feel is a satisfying conclusion to its plot. Basically, in the Season 2 finale, season arc villain, kaput. Season arc good guy foil, dead. That one guy, Starlight, just fucking murdered in that one episode, completely unaddressed. Ryan, government property. The boys themselves, government property. It's all wrapped up nicely with a tight bow while still leaving room to set up concepts that'll be expanded upon later, like Homelander's building insecurity, Newman's reveal as the head exploder who causes heads to explode by their power to make heads explode by exploding the heads which proceed to the boys being no longer on the run. They finally have full immunity for everything and are generally much healthier relationship-wise. All is well. Season 2's ending feels so properly conclusive that it's almost like this threshold that is not to be crossed lightly. Seasons 1 and 2 feel like they form a complete story when put together. Anything that would come after it would effectively be the sequel to Seasons 1 and 2 as a contiguous story. Whatever would come next would have to be bigger, grander, more explosive, more bombastic, greater. And that was the exact promise that would be made with Season 3. Let's see if they delivered on it.
I see you got the extra whipped cream in there, huh?
Yeah.
Yummers.
There are exceedingly few pieces of media that have perturbed me in quite the same way as The Boys Season 3. I really want to like this season more than I do. There's also going to be a bit of a change in the structure of this video going forward. You read the title. It's not something polarizing or outrageous or kind of stupid like The Downfall of The Boys, or The Boys is Terrible and I Hate It, or The Boys Season 4, How to Destroy Your Audience. Editing Jack here. Apparently Drinker changed the title of that video. I wrote it back when the video was called How to Destroy Your Audience, but now it's The Boys Season 4, How Did It Turn Rotten? So if anybody's watching this from the future, this is the video I'm referring to. It's quite bad. This is about how I fell out of love with The Boys, and I've talked it already amount about why I came to love the show in its earlier years, but it was in Season 3 that the substantial cracks in it really began to show for me. I feel like it was around the time of this season's release that a lot of people online started watching the show. In the moment, it felt like there was a lot more buzz around The Boys in mid-2022 than during any of the first two seasons' release cycles. As a mentally sound, well-adjusted, normal member of the OK Buddy Fresco community, there was a significant ramp up in the amount of discussion and memes related to the show in the month leading up to Season 3's release, and most of that hype, I believe, was owed to one man. let me recite the magic words. Fab Five Freddy told me everybody's fly. DJ spinning, I said my. Flash is fast, Flash is cool. Francois c'est pas flashy, no dude, and you don't stop.
Sure shot, go out to the parking lot.
I think the most correct take I'm gonna have in this entire video is that Jensen Ackles as Soldier Boy is one of the greatest things to come out of this IP. Season 3 simply would not be the same without him, and that's kind of insane considering he only really joins the main cast at the end of episode 5 out of 8. But we are kind of getting ahead of ourselves. Let's take it back. The Boys Season 3 establishes a lot early into its run. Between Temp V, the power struggle between Starlight and Homelander, and the search for Soldier Boy, it is very, very clear very early on that this season is going to cover some serious ground. What sets Season 3 apart from Season 2 in my eyes is how focused everything feels here. Aside from the Frenchie Kimiko subplot, which still certainly has its moments, just about every factor at play in this season builds into the boys' primary goal of killing Homelander. Temp V presents a very important choice for the boys. While it does a great job of evening the playing field against the Supes, leading Butcher and more interestingly Hughie to take it, MM and Frenchie call it cringe and dumb because in their minds it's crossing a huge moral line.
The whole point of what we do is that no one should have that kind of power.
Meanwhile, Homelander is not recovering well from the PR disaster of his girlfriend being exposed for being an actual, literal, unironic, as well as the emotional disaster of being rejected by his own son, who also pan-seared said girlfriend so bad she returned to factory settings. Homelander is, for the first time in his career, not universally seen as the top dog of the superhero business, being surpassed in popularity by Starlight. There's a scene in the first episode where Homelander pays Butcher a visit. He tells him, hey, I think we both don't really care about all this corporate bullshit. I hate you, you hate me. Let's do some crazy shit. I'm thinking we could gear up to throw hands. Nothing will be the same after this season. Scorched Earth. Bitch. Butcher, of course, is totally down with this, and the I'm not the favorite anymore, Wolander is me plotline doesn't last very long. This one common through line of Homelander's arc nearly every season is how he thinks he knows everything about how the world works, so he bullies all the people around him, many of them actually understanding the depth of his idiocy but are afraid to say anything because he's Homelander. It always backfires on him in the long run, but you can see just how smart he feels up until that point. Homelander's master stroke this season is when he pressures Victoria Newman into ousting Stan Edgegear from Vought, declaring himself as the new CEO. He then smugly walks up to Stan, expecting him to finally break his composure and admit he's been bested, but Stan the man, in one of my favorite scenes of the whole show, just gives Homelander the absolute dressing down of a lifetime.
You are not worthy of my respect. You are not a god. You are simply bad product.
And then he calmly walks out of the cast to star in Netflix's Kaleidoscope. Guys, did you watch it in Tarantino order or Orange is the New Black order? Comment down below. It is kinda crazy to realize how little screen time Stan Edgar actually has. After the 4th episode of Season 3, we don't see him again until Season 4, Episode 5, and then he's gone again. But his shadow manages to loom over Homelander for the rest of the entire series, his last words to him clearly echoing in his head every time that he's so much as minorly inconvenienced. While the Vought bureaucracy is being upended, the boys are following a lead provided by Maeve about the one thing that might just pose a legitimate threat to Homelander, some mysterious super soup weapon that absolutely violated Soldier Boy back in the 80s. So, Butcher goes after the members of Soldier Boy's old team Payback, starting with gunpowder, but he almost gets got by his super aim, so he goes home feeling defeated. He sits down at his pewter and realizes, hey, things are rough, but maybe throwing away everything I do have for this warpath might not be worth it in the long run. Ring, ring, ring. Yo, Victoria Newman is the head exploder who explodes heads. I saw her explode a head by causing the head to explode by using her power to make heads explode, which explodes heads by making the head...
Grace Mallory. Yummers.
The Temp V and Soldier Boy plotlines are so tightly intertwined that it gives this season a really focused feel, almost more than Season 1. Even the vignettes into the things going on in Frenchie and Kimiko's side quests and whatever it is the Deep and A-Train are doing, all fit nicely into Season 3's runtime. Nothing really feels unimportant or aimless here. I actually really like A-Train this season. His whole identity crisis, him knowing how little he's actually valued by Homelander and the higher-ups, and wanting to appeal to them to prove that he's worth keeping around while while simultaneously wanting to try to do something genuinely good, but being so out of touch with the lives of regular people that he continuously falls flat and ends up hurting the people he's supposedly helping.
Is that a video game about the slave trade?
Some powerful stuff.
He ultimately decides to take justice into his own hands, which still fails to yield the result he wants. When Blue Hawk's heart gets transplanted into his chest, curing his heart issues, cementing him as a martyr, rather exposing him as the racist that he actually is. It all does a really great job of setting up for his arc in the next season, but we'll get there when we get there. That's sort of the theme with season 3. It's constantly building up and developing all these ideas that were all pretty good on their own, but having all of it, Soldier Boy, Temp V, Homelander's downward spiral, happening all simultaneously, it leads to this constant feeling of rising stakes, increased tension, and, in my opinion, the strongest hook to come back to the series week to week out of any season of The Boys. Man, I love so much of this season. Everything is firing on all cylinders. The boys are boying. The 7 is... Actually, I don't think there's ever actually 7 of them. Butcher is butching, Home is landing, A is training, the peak is peaking. All of this before the best part of the season explodes onto the scene. Soldier Boy's recruitment into the cast leads directly to what many would consider to be the best episode of not only this season, but the whole show.
Buddy, you think you look strong? You're wearing a cape. You're just a cheap fucking knockoff.
The marketing for Season 3 made one thing very clear very early on. The Herogasm arc from the comics would be getting an adaptation, and it was something that the showrunners were extremely proud of. In the official Boys comic, Herogasm was kinda just this excuse for Garth Ennis to make his artist draw some really, really freaky shit, and also have a hilarious scene of Hughie getting sodomized. In the show, Herogasm does of course include a lot of freaky shit, but in a really smart move on the writer's part, the episode never makes the comedy innate in the sheer madness of the on-screen debauchery its focal point. Instead, the Herogasm event is generally played pretty straight, with a point being made clear that the only ones here who actually enjoy it are the deranged, unhinged, and washed-up D-list soups, and also the peak. Me on October 1st. I'm sure I won't lose no Octopus October this year. Me on October 3rd. There's this really good little scene at the beginning of the episode where Homelander discovers Soldier Boy and tasks Noir with finding him. Noir, who up to this point did everything Homelander asked of him without any sign of hesitation, just... The fearless ninja assassin, who was nearly unstoppable last season, is, for the first time in the whole show, afraid. We'll circle back to him in a moment. Herogasm is Soldier Boy's first outing as a member of the main cast, and Jensen Ackles immediately steals the show. He talks with this unfiltered bravado, like that one high schooler every non-athlete is afraid to have gym class with. Him, Hughie, and Butcher all pull up to the local freak-off to kill the TNT twins, which... I guess goes well. This episode is remembered for one moment though. All throughout the series, Homelander has been this unstoppable monster. Every move the boys made needed to be in silence, otherwise he'd find them and it'd be an immediate game over. Except that one time, and that other time, and probably at least one more that I'm not thinking about. But look, things have changed, and we all know this was the best fight in the whole show. Watching this for the first time, I was aghast. Imagine being Homelander in this moment. You are the strongest superhero of today, facing off against the strongest soup in history. You are about to win, only to find out your other rival can now match your moveset. You're like, oh snap, this just got real. They're double teaming you, but you can hold your own still, just to be knocked out of the way by some unknown new combatant who's nearly as strong as the other two you're up against. You turn to face him and realize it is none other than Hughie fucking Campbell, standing there with utter cock confidence.
Their genitals!
The three of them proceed to utterly manhandle you. Barely managing to focus on what's left of your own strength, you miraculously push past them and fly off to be consoled by the realest person you know. Herogasm was a game changer. Not only was it just generally an entertaining episode, but it set the stakes for the rest of the season in no uncertain terms. Homelander, for the first time in the show's run, was on the back foot. The penultimate episode, while not quite reaching the same heights, does a lot of good work following up on what's been established. Soldier Boy is shown to be, while not as sadistic or degenerate as Homelander, quite a bit of a not good person. More parallels are drawn between Hughie and Butcher's dead brother Lenny, who gets mentioned once per season. We find out that Temp V is very much actually not a good thing, and gives you evil cancer if you take it exactly one more time than our boys have at this point. Kimiko takes regular V so that she can protect the people that she cares about and not be be useless on the sidelines, and this is a good thing in her specific case, unlike how Hughie does temp V to protect the people he cares about and not be useless on the sidelines. Homelander is really starting to feel the walls close in around him, now that people on the inside know that he is a loser. The real GOAT of this episode is Black Noir. I always love this guy. Look at him, he's just so silly. Noir has always been a side character, sycophantically following the every whim of Homelander. It was a running joke that he was the only other superhero Homelander actually liked, and that's largely because he just did what he was told without complaining. There are these little glimpses into the soul behind the mask in the first 2 seasons, but season 3 straight up takes the mask away. We finally learn all about the best boy, Irving, in this endearing little vignette with his silly little imaginary creature friends. He used to be a member of Payback, Soldier Boy's team, and was abused by Mr. Boy. Every single member of the team grew to hate their leader, and apparently Vought had ordered Payback to get rid of him to pave their way for a newer, shinier, soldierier boy. Following said orders, Noir gets lobotomized and his face disfigured. The scene fills in the blanks from the Mallory flashback earlier in the season. It hits so much harder when Noir reaches for his mask, which had always been meant to hide his face from the public. 1980s America was not ready for a black superhero, apparently. Now, hiding behind the mask is the only way to not have to be faced with a constant reminder of what Soldier Boy did to him. I think Nathan Mitchell's performance really stands out here. He'd been tasked with playing this character who never speaks or emotes anything with his face, yet he always manages to show so much personality and expression just through the way Noir moves. His best moment is right here. All of his friends, personifications of his own internal monologue, get him to stand up and take action.
Bravery isn't having no fear. Bravery is having fear. But you do it anyway.
Time to finish what you started.
I hate those fucking birds though. Overall, I really do appreciate this scene. It does a lot of heavy lifting to set up Noir's newfound conviction for the finale. We also learn that Soldier Boy is Homelander's dad. I don't know, that didn't seem very important, but I just thought I should mention. It goes without saying that season 3's finale had a lot, nay everything, riding on it. This season did an overall great job of building everything up. The tension here is at what feels like an all-time high for the entire series. Will Hughie take the final fatal dose of Temp V? Will Soldier Boy break his promise to Butcher so he can be with his son? Will Black Noir finish what he started? Will the Deep finally contribute anything to the plot? These were the questions I had going into the instant white hot wild back in 2022, and I don't think I can adequately describe how absolutely hyped I was for this episode, but I do think I can describe to you how disappointed I was when it finally came out.
You're fucking disappointed.
Yeah, the joke writes itself. So we start off pretty strong. Butcher does a good thing, but like in a Butcher way, and then rides off to the tower with Marine Man. To make the stakes all that much higher, the writers, Homelander, actually remembers that Ryan exists, so he comes out to scoop up his boy. My best boy returns. Butcher, Soldier, and Boy are on their way to kill Homelander and Noir. The rest of the boys are on their way to stop them. Meanwhile, the 7, and by the 7 I mean the 2, prepare for war. It is so on. Anything can happen. We've seen how cruel Soldier Boy can be, so we know the heel turn can come at any moment. Homelander knows his relationships with Noir and Soldier Boy are mutually exclusive. Even though he is literally the worst person ever, it'll be interesting to see what decision he makes once the time finally arrives. At least that's what seemed like the logical next step for the story to take. I was so ready for my glorious king to take down the demon who haunted his entire superhero career, and I think something broke in me when I first saw this scene.
Did you know that I had a father out there? Fuck. Why didn't you tell me?
This is the exact moment the show died for me. I know I'm being dramatic. It's literally just a stupid TV show. It's never that deep, I know. But this, it just made me mad when I first saw it. Not at Homelander, really. This is something he would do, I guess. More at the writing. We have in Noir an incredible amount of potential for where his story can go. Sure, in hindsight, his entire life story and motivation being laid out in such an impactful way is a clearer death flag than a cop saying, "This is my last day on the force before I retire to a life of peace and love with my wife, who I love very, very much." My issue isn't that he dies. My issue is that his death is bad. It does that exact thing that anyone who knows anything anything about writing tells you not to do, giving a minor character a backstory and or an increased focus in the narrative to gaslight the audience into thinking they actually care about them through sheer volume of exposure, just so that you can give their death the illusion of greater impact because the recency bias toward that character. It's cringe! Okay, but the finale can still be salvaged, right? Black Noir wasn't the only thing being built up to. As long as the final battle delivers, it'll all be fine. Wait, so Butcher betrays Soldier Boy in the heat of the battle. I get that he's concerned about Ryan, but couldn't he have just, like, gotten him out of there? At least Hughie gets to complete his arc and manage to contribute to the fight and support Annie without needing to go, nothing personnel, kid, teleports behind you, grabs your ball sack, and it did nothing. In all fairness, this move did give everybody exactly enough time to get around him and do the Thanos thing, but it's still pretty silly that he just gets up immediately with no visible damage. He then charges his explosion and nobody runs away. He could probably just stop the charge right now and run off and nobody would contest him. They're all standing around and looking at each other like, guys, what do we do now? Queen Maeve is in this scene, by the way. Don't worry about her either. You know, they just fall out sometimes. And after a whole season of being antagonized by Homelander with little agency, she saves the day with a well-timed power play. Wait. She survived that? She survived that?! Now Butcher looks double stupid for turning on Soldier Boy. Like, this blast apparently does so little damage that Maeve can survive it at point-blank range and then fall like 50 stories without her powers. Ryan could be living a normal life as a normal boy right now, William. Everything that happens now is entirely your fault, William. Rebecca died for nothing, William. You did this all for nothing, William. The rest of the episode is really just set up for season 4. It's pretty good setup, don't get me wrong. It would be inaccurate to say that nothing happened this season, but I can't say it really feels like all the events that got us here feel like they've had any substantial impact. The show certainly wasn't perfect up to this point, but this finale is filled with the kind of cheap, low-effort, shock value rug pulls you'd expect from an early draft. I swear, I cannot tell if I'm talking about The Boys or Game of Thrones Season 8 at this point. I mean, it really just feels like breaks between editing Jack here. I want to make a little correction. I have a confession to make. I actually haven't watched Game of Thrones. I know, it makes me sound like a fucking, like, loser, because I'm like, oh, well, this is just like Game of Thrones. Fuck, I know. Don't give me some shit. I just fucking fell. All is fine, I'm nice, I'm well, but I think a better comparison to make would be to Dexter Season 2. The meat of Dexter Season 2 is Dexter himself on the run from the FBI, and it's all about, oh no, I think they're gonna catch me. And the conflict from the later parts of the season are when Detective Dokes is completely onto him. He's basically caught him in the act of disposing of a body and says, all right, well, you're gonna come with me. And Dexter's like, no, of course not. So he traps him in a cabin in the swamp. All right, awesome, crazy setup, and now he's debating with himself. Should I kill him? Should I not kill him? But before he even gets the chance to, like, actually make a decision, Dokes ends up getting killed by a fucking British woman who just shows up. She's like, And that's the same feeling I get from The Boys Season 3's finale, you know? I hope that I can in some way impress upon you how much Black Noir's death scene fucking pissed me off. Just the idea of taking this character, who'd been basically comic relief at that point, and developing him, giving him like such a tragic backstory, giving him some reason to be involved in this story, giving him a connection to this season's arc, and then you take that, and then you just don't follow through on it. It's just, it doesn't make sense. Like, at that point in the story, I'm just, at that point, I'm completely disengaged from the events of the finale. And it's not without its merits, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. I couldn't care any less. After Noir's death, honestly, Homelander might as well have just killed me too, because I just am not...
Hello, William.
That's not my name.
Actual, real John Jack?
Yeah.
No. You're actual woke John Jack.
What does that mean? Hey, breaks while editing, breaks between editing Jack here. I want you to peer into an alternate reality with me for a second. Remember that part of the beginning of the video where I said my girlfriend wants me to write fan fiction? I bet you didn't expect to see that come back. We call this in the business Chekhov's concealed carry. Let's say the finale plays pretty much identical up until this scene. Homelander confronts Black Noir in just the same way that he does in the original. The timelines diverge here though. When Homelander asks Noir why he never told him about Soldier Boy being his father, we see Noir look past him for a second. Buster Beaver and co. somberly nod at him as he reaches toward his helmet and takes it off. Yes, I know Homelander can see under his mask already. He literally says as much in this scene, but it's more Noir's intentionality that's the point here. This would be the first time in nearly 40 years that Irving willingly draws attention to his face. Homelander sees this and is somewhat taken aback. He'd always had a soft spot for Irving, and while you could argue that it extends only to his ability to get things done, in the interest of Homelander having a glimmer of being a three-dimensional character, he would listen to Noir here, or at least think in his head that he's being an active, good listener to his friend. After a moment, he understands what his friend is showing him, and he asks, "He did this to you, didn't he?" Noir nods slowly and puts the mask back on. Homelander hesitates for a moment before figuring out what to say next. He still doesn't have the capacity to admit he's wrong, even when the evidence to the contrary is literally staring him down. A beat later, he floats the idea that Soldier Boy could have changed since his payback days. Sure, all the evidence points away from this notion, but is it not in character for Homelander to think he knows better, especially given that he's unaware of the finer details of what Soldier Boy went through in Russia? He'd look at Noir and say something to the effect of, "Look at me, I never thought I would care about anyone else, except you, of course, buddy. But then I found out I had a son, a family. Who wouldn't take up a chance to know their family?" Noir would naturally insist that Soldier Boy still needs to die, but Homelander outright refuses without giving his dad at least a chance to hear him out. He'd then beg Noir to support him in this. Irving, against his better judgment, nods. End scene. Keeping Black Noir alive to join the final battle would add significantly more dramatic potential than what we get in the official cut. In the original, it's pretty much everybody ganging up on Soldier Boy with the exception of Maeve keeping Homelander from ending the fight single-handedly. With Noir present, we add a layer of tension to the build-up to the fight. Homelander would try to talk Soldier Boy out of killing Noir, trying to appeal to his perceived desire to be a family. It would be another case of Homelander thinking he's playing some 5D chess move while missing the broader context that makes the situation more complicated than he could understand. When Soldier Boy, Butcher, and Maeve roll up, the initial confrontation would go largely the same, with some added name-calling toward Noir on Soldier Boy's part. Homelander would try to play the role of diplomat, introducing Ryan and trying to convince his dad to move on. Mr. Boy would point out how it's all Noir's fault that he couldn't be there to raise Homelander in the first place, calling Homelander weak and initiating the fight, except this time he can't just blow up Homelander on the spot. An extra combatant on Team Homelander makes the fight more dynamic, because we no longer need to rush to divide Team Kill Homelander. Here's my pitch for a quote-unquote improved final battle. Fight choreography is not my strong suit. I couldn't tell you the optimal sequence of punches, lasers, and throws for the battle, but remember, this video is just my opinion. If at any point you disagree with any of the ideas that I have, it's because your brain is not as developed as mine. I can imagine anything. And that includes a version of this show where Ryan grew up watching good content on YouTube. Hey guys, Sky here for another Minecraft mod showcase, and today I am doing the independent music career mod, because I couldn't keep one afloat in the real world.
Editing Jack here. I cannot do this anymore. I need to finish this segment.
Like, I just keep adding bits to the video. I keep writing new stuff and putting it in, and I'm like, yes, this will be a fine addition to the video. I cannot do this anymore. End this segment. End this segment.
You can't talk to me that way.
I didn't say anything.
I mean, from before. I'm the peak.
I took a long break while writing this video. I mean, like a very long break. I started back when season 4 had just concluded, and now I'm praying for a Gen V season 2 trailer to drop when I'm almost done editing so that The Boys can be a popular search term again once I finally release it. Season 4 is really weird, and fan discussion around it is even weirder. I haven't seen this much nonsensical bad faith criticism since the Star Wars sequels. That's not to say that every or even the majority of points brought up against either of these are invalid. Far from it. I just feel the need to specify that if you somehow made it this far into the video, still dreading that I'm gonna base my entire perspective around the W word. The woke left? Well, where'd they go? Where'd they go? Can you tell them I miss them? Why didn't the woke tell me they were leaving? I will say there is one specific big issue that holds this season back far more than the others that I will get to, but to argue that the issue itself is the show's messaging, it's just sad and reductive. Season 4's commentary is a lot more heavy-handed than overt than it was in seasons past, and I personally do find it quite grating that half of the cast talks like Daily Wire writers. It's just really hand-holdy, and it reads like the writers just don't trust the audience to grasp anything that has even a smidge of subtlety. It's always been clear where the writers stood politically, but there was always some level of creativity or nuance to how their beliefs were voiced, but now it just feels really condescending, even to viewers who already agree with what's being put down, especially to viewers who already agree with what's being put down. It almost retroactively makes the commentary from earlier seasons ring a little hollow. The adage has always been, write what you know, so it only makes sense that the boys' writers have always nailed depicting out-of-touch performative activists who just read out meaningless platitudes rather than actually contributing to the causes they champion.
I take responsibility for racism.
All of that being said, I think the average audience member who goes outside and has something of a fulfilling social life could probably overlook season 4's hyper-focus on being on the right side of history if the rest of it was straight up goated. However, this is, at least in my opinion, far and away the weakest season of The Boys. It's not a failure on every level. That's what frustrates me the most, honestly. The fact that it does manage to navigate a few of its topics even better than in earlier years at some points, while at the same time it's doubling down on some of the more questionable choices from the last season and managing to fail its characters and premise in wholly new and embarrassing ways. It's like putting a cut on a band-aid, except the cut is actually super long and deep, and I only actually covered up a small segment of it, and also I'm allergic to band-aids, so it started breaking out in hives. So while some of the bleeding is stopped, I still come out of the situation with more problems than I initially sought out to solve. I'm assuming this isn't the first video you've ever watched, so I won't read out the definition of the term flanderization, but do keep it in the back of your mind. It will be on the exam. Let's start with the good. He finally landed home. Episode 4 serves almost as this microcosm of everything that made Homelander work so well back in season 1. Here we have a collection of characters who aren't necessarily innocent, but are still human and utterly powerless to stop a, for all intents and purposes, omnipotent Homelander. His intentions aren't immediately clear, but every word out of his mouth carries these threatening undertones. As the episode goes on, he keeps exerting his power over everyone in the lab, taking his trademark perverse pleasure in the, in his eyes, rightful suffering of those who humiliated and tormented him over the years. When the head scientist shows up, you can see the genuine pride she takes in how Squirt ended up the exact way she envisioned, even if that does lead to the abject terror of how he forces her to spend her final moments. All that being said, Homelander being as effective as he is in episode 4 makes it all that much more apparent how unintimidating he's been for the past couple seasons. The literal previous episode had Hughie within touching distance of Homelander, yet he manages to get away perfectly fine. Yes, I am aware that many events in the US are coated with zinc, which he can't see through, but they're not soundproof. Homelander just feels like a different character to who he was back in the show's earlier days. Am I crazy for saying this? More on that in a bit. Right now, I want to talk about the festivities, as they say. Ain't no party like a tech night party. Here's the long and short of it. The boys, without the two guys who actually do the planning, concoct a plan to send Hughie in a stolen costume to get information out of a supe whose entire thing is his super senses. Plus, Homelander is also there, which they didn't predict. And oh, what do you know? Golly gee whiz, everything went wrong. But in all fairness, I don't think anyone saw just how wrong this would go coming. Did you hear that? That's the sound of beating a dead horse. I do not want to talk about Tech Knight's dungeon and the horrors Hughie has to go through in the wake of euthanizing his father. I'll put a link to a very good video about the topic in the description if you want to hear somebody way more qualified to talk about this than I. Instead, I want to talk about a different aspect of Eric. That's a dark way to look at it. We view it as hilarious Kripke's incredible vision for this episode. As I alluded to earlier, I read through the comic this show is based on, and while it has taken on a reputation for being kinda dog shit, there were some highlights here and there, concepts that were executed pretty well. One such concept in Garth Ennis's The Boys was Tech Knight. Comic Tech Knight was introduced in therapy, discussing these sexual compulsions he'd been having toward pretty much everything in his life. It's pretty in line with a lot of the subject matter the comic has covered up to that point. However, it was approached from a new perspective, one of a man who knew he was sick in the head and wanted to do something about it. He understands how messed up these thoughts he has are, and he takes steps to avoid acting on them. In the show, he is totally fine with these urges. He embraces them even. Keep in mind that unlike his comic counterpart, he knows this is all because of a brain tumor. The tech cave is just a sex dungeon. His sidekick Ladio, who in the comic Tech Knight has sent away to protect him, is now tied up in a gimp suit. Hell, the reason we're even seeing the tech cave is to facilitate an encounter with Webweaver, a character who didn't do much of anything in the comic, but he was implied to be one of the only supes who was actually a decent person. In the show, he's a strung-out addict who hilariously poo-poo farts in front of Homelander before getting turned into a Dubai chocolate bar. This isn't quite the big issue that I was alluding to at the start of the segment, but it is a symptom of it. Outside of their unique powers, there's nothing that really sets each villain apart from the others, and while there were certainly a lot of overlap in the earlier seasons, at least everybody felt different enough in terms of the flavor of their personality and all that. Imagine, if you will, the boys encountering a Webweaver, or any supe, who actually maintains a strong moral backbone. Not just a Starlight who gets roped into the plot just as she's fully awakened into the cynicism of Vought. Not a Kamiko who was never a part of the Vought world to begin with. Someone who's been a part of the machine for years, but still retains their humanity. We got a glimpse of this in Supersonic last season, but he gets fridged before he gets a chance to really contribute to the plot in any meaningful way. Maeve and A-Train are decent enough examples of the potential of this, but Maeve gets shafted into a life of having hardly enough screen time to give her anything to do, and A-Train only really gets his soul halfway through season 3. All that to say, I just wish there was more variety to the motivations of the villains in this show, because as it stands, almost everybody is awful for the same set of reasons. Please consult the graph. Nowadays, it feels less like the real exploration into the corrupting influence of unchecked power that season 1 offered, and more like an excuse for the writers to show off whatever twisted debauchery they can come up with that they're definitely not into themselves. Think Termite in season 3, think Splinter this season, think Tech Knight. A lot of scenes this season feel less like they're meant to progress the plot or character progression, but rather to justify some kind of insane, oh my god, I can't believe they did that moment. How do we get to that sauna scene? Well, let's set it at the second conspiracy convention within 2 seasons, where weirdly almost every Vought related one here is true. How do we get to the evil sheep? Let's just have the secret soup virus research lab be at a farm, because that's a secure location where if something were to go wrong, the consequences would certainly just be contained to the facility. And besides, it's not like there's already a precedent for the damage a beat-up hamster can cause. How do we get to the ice rink massacre? Well, let's just have Homelander, Newman, and Sage meet up to discuss their very clever and not at all on-the-nose plans.
Critical soup theory.
At an ice rink, because that is a very secure location that the boys can't sneak into through the vents. I go back to this scene in particular because it does do a great job of exemplifying my big issue with this season. Hughie should have died here. And that's not me saying well, it would be really good for the themes and story if he was taken out at this point where his arc naturally concluded, although it would count as a mercy killing knowing what happens next. I want to compare it to a scene in season 1. Homelander is right on top of the boys, Frenchie and Butcher are right next to him. It's made painfully clear that if anything sets off his super senses, it is over. The only way out of this situation is to distract him with something a whole city away, a contingency that had to be set up in advance. There's no such planning in season 4 because the writers decided that it wouldn't be needed anymore. Let's go back to when Hughie goes out with the express goal of spying on Homelander. MM is standing nearby. I guess he's expecting everything to go perfectly fine. If it doesn't, there's no backup plan for if things go awry. He just runs up and starts haphazardly fiddling with the lights, hoping Homelander doesn't just fly up to the catwalk, which he does. Hughie doesn't even get out of there because of any planning on the boys' part. A-Train just shows up and fills in Queen Maeve's role of rescuing the good guys from the consequences of their actions at the last second. This kind of thing is a mainstay of season 4. After the boys kill Splinter, they just let Firecracker briskly jog away. It's not like they're above killing her or maybe even keeping her here and interrogating her. The evil sheep get taken out only at the cost of an unnamed bodyguard never touching any of the real people. This one's even funnier because nobody even floats the idea of the head exploder exploding any of the sheep's heads by causing them to explode using her powers to make heads explode. When the Deep and new Noir attack Butcher and Annie, there is a chance, an opportunity, an opening where Deep is alone and incapacitated while Noir is outside recovering. Deep should have died here. And unlike Hughie in episode 3, I actually am saying it would be really good for the themes and story if he gets taken out at this point where his arc naturally concludes, because this is where his arc should naturally conclude. Him and A-Train have had opposite storylines these past 2 seasons. While A-Train has been trying to atone for his sins, Deep has been doubling down at every given opportunity. Please tell me why, in the same episode where A-Train makes the character-defining decision to leave his life at Vought behind and is rewarded by the story by being allowed to escape, that it wouldn't be the perfect opportunity to punish Deep for his inability to change, especially right after this character-defining monologue monologue.
Me Too's over, sweetheart. It didn't work. Wah, wah, wah. I do not respect your truth. I do not honor and cherish your story. I do not fucking apologize.
They don't even try with the excuse for this one. just says Lamau, I don't know, as if he wasn't just knocked out by a strong soup. Now, I know some power scaling enthusiast is gonna say, oh, well, Deep can withstand the pressure of the Marianas Trench, so he's practically invincible.
Are you sure?
That's fair enough, sure. However, I raise this. The power level of each individual soup, with the sole exception of Homelander, was never the point of the show. If there was an alternate version of The Boys where Deep does die here, I'd bet what little is left of my soul after uploading this video that not a single person would say, hey, wait, that really doesn't make sense. If Annie meets Deep again in season 5, what's he gonna do? Is he gonna say this exact speech again? This is as emotionally and thematically charged as their conflict could realistically get. My issue with season 4 was never that it's too political or that it's too over the top and weird and offensive. My issue with season 4 is that it is too safe. Time and time again, season 4 shows that it is afraid to commit to the bit. Aside from A-Train, I don't think a single major character felt like they were ever believably in danger. Frenchie's boy toy vanishes the second the writers have to start developing him. The same thing happens with Hughie's mom once Hugh Sr. is out of the picture. Homelander is still only on the edge of snapping, just like he has been since season 2. His insecurities about becoming Oldlander have no impact. Hughie and Annie's forced relationship drama is neatly resolved with no hard feelings. His trauma is still barely ever taken seriously, and the innocent man she killed 2 seasons ago is still never mentioned. Sister Sage, resident schemer and holder of the fraudulent title smartest person to ever smart, is never shown scheming or doing anything particularly smart. Instead, she just shows up at the end and says, yeah, that was all my plan. I'd go so far as to say Frenchie and are demonstrably smarter than her, because we've actually seen them do smart shit. At this point, I'm convinced if the boys just recruited Saul Goodman, she'd be done for. I could keep going, but I'm tired. And at this point, I think I've made myself clear. Back in season 1, the boys' writers tried to challenge the audience, but by season 4, the writers are barely even trying to challenge themselves. If I were to keep in fashion with the boys' current MO, I would have survived getting jumped by Homelander a minute ago. The reasoning? I don't know, a popular character from a different IP that was relevant last year would save me at the last second, of course.
Actual woke John. What a classic.
Glad I wasn't that guy. Yeah, you should really check your peripherals, buddy. By the way, thanks for the save, Gojo.
Get a load of this guy. Homelander? More like home loser.
Oh, hell yeah. Sex tonight?
So that's The Boys. I mean, I don't hate it. I just want to go over a couple other notes I have that I couldn't naturally fit into the flow of the video. For starters, I'm a little concerned about season 5, but frankly, at the same time, I feel like my expectations are a lot lower than they were for seasons 3 and 4. I feel like I am kind of going into this jaded, so whatever it turns out to be, I don't imagine I'll feel disappointed in it the same way that I was the past 2 seasons. I think the big thing that I'm concerned about this coming season is how they're going to portray Soldier Boy. There is a noticeable disparity between the way that the writers perceive Soldier Boy and the way that the audience does. You could see in interviews that the showrunners thought of him as being like the greater of the 2 evils between Homelander and him, but he's just demonstrably not. I've seen this image floating around on the internet, and it's just really silly to me. I understand Soldier Boy's not a good person. I would not call him morally great. He is firmly in the villain category. But to say that he's one of the worst people, okay, this is just going off memory. The Deep is a racist, Homelander is a racist, TechNet is a racist. Who else? I know there's a lot more in this show. They really like writing about the Shapeshifters are racist. Firecracker is a pet. Black Noir has committed more war crimes. Stormfront has committed more hate crimes. Translucent was also a pest. I don't know. I don't think that would count him as being worse, but rather probably in the same category. Here's more that I'm definitely forgetting right now. I see the point of the character. I understand the intent with him, that he is not a good person and Butcher is making some huge moral compromise by siding with him. But to say that he is worse than Homelander, based on what we have seen and what has been told to us about him, is just disingenuous and cringe. I imagine that Season 5 Soldier Boy is gonna suffer a lot of the same things that Season 4 Homelander did, in the sense that a lot of the worst traits of his personality are gonna be amplified just to make the opinion that we're supposed to have about him more clear. I don't imagine there's gonna be much room for interpretation with him. Some other things. I think in Season 4, Episode 4, it was a missed opportunity when Firecracker was giving her whole expose about Starlight and her abortion. I understand why they went with the plot point that they did. It's a contentious issue and the boys' writers wanted to show their stance on it, and it's something that is both very private and unreasonable for her to share. At the same time, I feel it would have been more interesting if, say, Firecracker started like listing off a bunch of stuff about some innocent father who went missing under mysterious circumstances and was found dead on the side of the road. I think reading that out like it's like this conspiracy about how Starlight killed this man and we the audience know it's true, I feel like that could have led to more fascinating moral conundrums, especially if, say, Hughie didn't know about this. Because as it stands, I feel like the writers have either forgotten about it or really desperately want us to forget about it. Last thing that I can come up with off the top of my head, the words in the Starlight Foundation, if you take the first letter of each word, you get... Alright, cool, I'm gonna go on vacation now. Shitty webcam I got from my college bookstore. We did it. We made it to the end. If you don't recognize me, it's because I took a few breaks while editing. Little did I know that the vacation spot I went to in particular was the beach that makes you old. I always end my videos with some kind of promise that I'm gonna start uploading more consistently and I'm gonna upload again soon, and anybody who's been here knows exactly how that went. It's been well over a whole year since my last good video, but one goofy life update, 2 showers, 3 jobs, and 0 haircuts later, I'm back. I want to keep making videos at whatever rate I can manage. I have a bunch of ideas and plans in the vault that I do really want to put work into, and if you've made it this far, then maybe, just maybe, you might want to, you know, think of it as a long-term investment. Eventually you'll get something. Might not be this week, might not be this month, might not be this year, but eventually. Maybe, potentially, who knows? There's nothing in life that is certain. Things have a tendency to just kind of happen, and maybe Homelander isn't a very good father, or superhero, or leader, or executive, or politician, but maybe, just maybe, he could be a good friend.
You know, I think we started things off on the wrong foot. Here's an Oomph Doom mask. Bring it in. I'm Homelander.
I threw a wish in the well. Don't ask me, I'll never tell. I looked to you as it fell, and now you're in my way. I trade my soul for a wish, pennies and dimes for a kiss. I wasn't looking for this, but now you're in my way. Your stay was holding, ripped jeans, skin was showing. Hot night, wind was blowing. Where you think you're going?
Yummers.